The sixth meeting of the 23rd Council will please come to order. We are now under general public comment. Okay, next speaker will be Leland Taylor, followed by Tom Dent, followed by Barbara Grothus and Sue Flint. And if your name's been called, please come to the front to be prepared to speak. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, and President Sanchez and councilors, I appreciate your time. I'm here to speak my opposition to any tax increases which are in development. I've read a proposed ordinance which lists all of the deficiencies, vacancies, and needs for additional employee vacancies to be filled. And then at the end of it, it says, but the money will go into general fund. Well, that sounds to me like a license to conduct the shell game. What I've seen is that the city has funded art through vacancy fund and other entities where the money was not intended for its use in art, and now is in a position where they have to make up that by raising taxes. And we all know that raising taxes are not good for the economy. Taxes do not create employment, neither does regulation. And we have a decreasing gross receipts tax, as I hear earlier this evening, and we are looking at raising taxes to reduce business content in this city. I'm still baffled why there's an economic development effort on one hand. On the other hand, you are strangling businesses. We have one of the highest gross receipts and general receipt tax structure, plus an impossible regulatory program where it costs $11,000 to get a patio in the city. So I think really we need to look more at management. We need to look at getting systems in place to cut expenses, to consolidate, make more efficient. We may have to cut some programs, but let's not cut our business lifeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Grothus, followed by Sue Flint, followed by Barley Kane. Tom Dent. Again, once your name has been called, would you please come to the front and be prepared to speak?
Hi, I came here originally to endorse Charlie Bennett, but I hear that's been withdrawn. I echo the statements of the former speaker. If a gross receipts tax is enacted, I really hope that most of that money does go directly to public safety, as it really didn't the last time the gross receipts tax were raised. And I also agree with Simon of the importance of reinstating public access TV and giving the community more of a voice than just 2 minutes at this podium. Thanks.
Barbara Grothus.
Good evening, President and councilors. You know, we're reading in the papers and online now about the mismanagement of the DOJ process costing us millions of dollars under the last administration. You know, it is cavalier to spend the last administration took this money and created obstacles for the DOJ so that the consent decree could not be implemented or move forward. And I think it's actually criminal that millions of dollars have been wasted for the prior number of years, and we're starting back at zero with a police department that has leadership and a mayor that has the leadership to go along with the consent decree. And you know, as a person who's been concerned about the situation with our police and the unconstitutional policing that has been identified here, I'm certainly happy to have a new administration and a new police chief who are going to be collaborative rather than obstructive in the process. But in the meantime, who, besides people out here on this council, is going to look after our public money and tell us what these crooks in the prior administration did with all the money. It doesn't matter if it was for art, it doesn't matter if it was obstructing the DOJ. The taxpayers deserve to know how our money was spent and where the hundreds of millions of dollars have gone that are being alleged to have been misappropriated by the way that speaker to people before, or the prior people talked about. It's really insulting to be out here and find that we're being asked now to tax ourselves higher while at the same time this criminal conduct has gone on here against the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Flint, followed by Barley Kane.
Good evening, I'm Sue Flint. You know, for a month now, I don't know if it's been a month, but since the last time I was here, I got very angry about the Panhandler bill because I just studied social problems and how you make claims and you can create social problems, and that's what I felt you did on your bill. To the public with your persuasion. But to move forward, I also am very disappointed that the administration hasn't looked further into where the deficit came from, why we're not hearing why, where, and how these problems were created. I know because I made it a point to retire and go to school to educate myself to understand how these things happen. I've watched you, I take your bills, I call the people that you go into business with. Councilman President Sanchez, you never once picked up the phone for Presbyterian to ask Mr. Jefferson about that Presbyterian hospital. You know, Wall was bullying them to make a certain commitment. They might have put that money in, but they can quickly take it out. And they have no intention of being bullied into building a hospital unless there's a need. You know, you want to tax people when you've been giving away the taxes. I stood here before you and said, in the economic development and all the bills that you were passing for the developers, I told you about Albuquerque development commissioners who were writing all of these bills for themselves. And like the Imperial building, Mr. Silverman, he was supposed to pay property taxes. How did he get out of property taxes? That would have generated money. He got Yes Housing in there and fell under the nonprofit, so he doesn't pay it. We need to look into this. And the one thing I want to say is Councilman Harris sponsored a bill for the past administration that had language where the administration could move money anywhere they wanted and without asking. You need to make sure when you pass this tax that it stays where it's supposed to go, because as it stands now, they can move it. Thank you.
Thank you. Burley Kane, followed by Tom Greer. Go ahead and proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Burley Kane. On behalf of Americans for Prosperity and the 25,000 members we have supporting us in the state, I ask that you vote against a gas tax. You don't bring it to the table. I would talk about a couple numbers, 500 million and 75 million. And 500 million is the amount of money that you guys had coming in from the safety fund, from what we understand, for police. And that went to the general fund. You guys have already tried this trick, taking money, saying it's for something, and then dumping it into the general fund. 75 million, it's the amount of money you guys dumped into Central to replace the old buses with new buses. That don't work. You guys need to understand economic prosperity. We stand in opposition to the gas tax, to the gross receipts tax, to mandatory sick leave, to minimum wage increases. If you guys want to compete, you have to realize that cities around us are competing with us. States around us are competing with us. The world around us is competing with us. If you want the kids to stay here, they have to have jobs. If you keep taking all the money from the people in this state, they will leave and go somewhere where it's a better climate for them. So please be more rational, more accountable, and think about the economic prosperity of the Albuquerque citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Tom Greer.
I'm not as tall as Burley. Tom Greer, I'm the State Field Director for Concerned Veterans for America. I live in Berlin, but I am part of the greater Albuquerque Economic Development community because it extends out that far. I just wanted to bring something to your attention. We're talking about the gas tax, we're talking about the gross receipts taxes, and I want to echo that the money needs to be, if it's appropriated, if it's taxed, it needs to go to where it's supposed to go. We've been kind of discouraged about that in the past. But one of the things that I wasn't too sure, and this is something that we're opposing as well, in the current administration, in this infrastructure package, there's a presentation that I wasn't sure you were aware of here to increase the federal gas tax by 25 cents. Which more than doubles what it is now, increases the gas tax to New Mexicans by 67%, putting us in the 5th position nationally in the percentage of increase, and puts an additional burden at the federal level, not adding to it what Albuquerque's talking about doing in a gas tax, another $320 per household in simply gas tax for our poorer citizens and those who have the hardest problem getting to work as it is now. And of course, a lot of the people who I'm concerned about are retired veterans living on pensions, but it impacts all of our most at need citizens. And this is one of those things that hurts them the most, and may not impact all of us here in the room as much, but it's critical to realize that we don't operate in Albuquerque in a vacuum when we talk about raising taxes. But we also have to be very apparent with what's going on at the federal level that tends to compound the issue for all of our citizens in all of New Mexico, but particularly in the greater Albuquerque area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, you know, it's interesting to hear these arguments. I mean, we've just had statements from Washington that we're going to pretty much turn our previous funding mechanisms for roadways on its head. And instead of the feds helping us out to the tune of 80% of projects, we're going to turn that on its head, and we're going to get 20% from the feds, and we're going to have to raise 80% ourselves. So people that are coming down here and saying, well, the Fed might be doing something and the state might be doing something, and you guys should not, and some of the same people who just spoke came down and said, we should not be enacting a 2-cent per gallon gas tax, and I maintain that we're going to have to start looking at that type of revenue, especially when it's directed to it's essentially a user tax for roadway maintenance. And just because we let that expire after a year because there's a new administration and people wanted to digest what that's all about, I'm not planning to let that drop. And I think we've got to look at local revenue under these circumstances. So you know, we could get back on a horse and buggy on a crumbling road that's turning to dust, and I think that probably still works, maybe with a horse. But otherwise, it's not going to work for the city of Albuquerque. So I find these arguments really interesting coming from folks who have come down here over the years and said, don't do this and don't do that and don't spend any money and don't raise any money for city government. I'm here to tell you we've got to raise money for city government or we're going to be in deep trouble. Thank you.
Councilor Davis. Councilor Borrego.
I just wanted to mention to Councilor Benton that if he takes his horse to Paseo del Norte, he might find some dirt roads.
Thank you. We've got two speakers left, Jason Vale Lancourt and Paul Gessing. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, President and Commissioners. I'm here representing me and my son because I think that this is how our process works. And so I am going to address you for me and Lyon, and I am going to talk to you, Mr. Benton, Commissioner Benton, I apologize, about just how much money I'm already spending to fund projects that are not doing well, that have not benefited me or my family or anybody that is a New Mexican that I can see. I also would like to tell you that a gas tax is going to affect me greatly. I have to travel for about 20 minutes to work through Albuquerque traffic. And it just, year after year, as our city grows, the traffic gets more and more compact, and I can assure you that that gas tax is going to have an impact on me. Sick leave is something that I worked very hard to try to educate everybody on. I grew up in a community that believed in you work for benefits, and if you work hard and you educate yourself a little bit more and more, that you too can have these things called benefits. I guess that doesn't matter anymore because we're going to just pass a law in the United States of America forcing business owners to do something that might actually be be detrimental to their business. So I'm constantly watching you all, and I'm perplexed as to why, if you guys are just like me, and I think you are, most of you live in my neighborhoods, and how can you possibly think that we can trust this city with more money when they have not been responsible for the last, you count the years, let's call it 12. Let's make it an even 12. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Gessing, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. My name is Paul Gessing. I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation policy research organization based here in Albuquerque. I'm here to discuss the proposed gross receipts tax that's going to be introduced tonight. And back in 2000, the GRT rate locally, cumulatively, was 5.8125%. Today it's 7.5, and if this tax hike is adopted, the rate will be 7.875. That would be a mind-numbing 35.5% increase since the year 2000. I understand completely that that is not all or even a majority necessarily city of Albuquerque. However, public safety is being discussed as one justification, and it's worth noting that we have a quarter-cent public safety tax that was passed in 2003 already on the books. There was an eighth of a cent as well in 2015 to fund exhibits at the biopark and the zoo. So this is a regressive tax. It is something that could be avoided, I think, if we grew our economy, which it hasn't. I've got Bureau of Labor Statistics data right here. Non-farm employment in Albuquerque right now is 397,000. That is lower than it was in October of 2008. So we've been totally stagnant economically for about a decade. I would point to, as venues for changing this situation, Green Jeans Farmery, Roy Solomon, front page of the Albuquerque Journal, famously said, "I'm not going to do another project in this town ever again." He was referring to our permitting structure. And KRQE did a recent story, found that the city collected $1.7 million in residential permits for patios on 97 of those patios, coming to an astonishing $17,885 per patio. We can attract business by being more business friendly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Benton.
So, I don't know, Mr. Rowell perhaps, or I guess the planning department might address this, but this is the second time I've heard about $17,000 or $11,000 fees for somebody to build a patio. I've never heard of such a thing. It seems like it's totally out of line. Could we find out? I mean, I guess if you build a super slab for a patio, then maybe it's $17,000, but Mr. Rowell, that doesn't sound right.
Mr. President and Councilor Benton, I wish I could give you that information off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to get that for you. I do think that there is perhaps a review that we need to do all those fees, but you certainly look at patios and the structures, depending on the size, et cetera, and the requirements to do the inspections. But let us get you that information so that you have that at your disposal.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that. I mean, to my knowledge, every construction permit's based on the valuation of the construction, and it would have to be a heck of a large patio to be based on that size. Thank you.
Thank you. We have concluded with general public comment.